You know what's funny about the galaxy? Everyone thinks they're the apex predator until they meet the actual apex predator. And then they spend the next several decades trying to convince themselves it was just a fluke. Take the Zorithian Empire, for instance. These guys had been the undisputed heavyweight champions of the Outer Rim for about 3 millennia. They had ships that could crack planets, warriors who could bench press small moons, and a bureaucracy so efficient it made Swiss clockwork look like a drunk toddler's finger painting. They were so confident in their superiority that they actually issued formal invitations to other species to come and challenge them. It was called the Grand Tournament of Supremacy, and it was exactly as pretentious as it sounds. The tournament happened every 50 standard years on Zorith Prime, and it was basically the galaxy's way of determining which species got to sit at the big kids' table. Winners got trade privileges, territorial rights, and the cosmic equivalent of a participation trophy that said, "Congratulations, you're not completely worthless." Losers got to go home and explain to their constituents why they were about to become mining colonies. Now here's where it gets interesting. By the time humanity stumbled into this galactic pissing contest, the Zorithians had won 47 tournaments in a row. They were so bored with winning that they'd started handicapping themselves just to keep things interesting. They'd fight with one arm tied behind their backs, or blindfolded, or, in one particularly memorable instance, while reciting epic poetry. They still won. So when the Terran Federation submitted their entry for the 48th tournament, the Zorithians didn't even bother to look up from their paperwork. Just stamped the application with a seal that roughly translated to, "Sure, whatever, another lamb for the slaughter." The humans, being humans, interpreted this as a warm welcome. Chapter 2. Meet the Meat Captain. Derek Hawthorne was not having a good day. Then again, he hadn't had a good day since accepting this assignment, and that was 3 months ago. He stood on the observation deck of the TSF Defiant, watching Zorith Prime grow larger in the view screen, and wondered, not for the first time, what he'd done to piss off High Command. "Sir?" Lieutenant Vasquez appeared at his elbow, holding a steaming cup of what the ship's replicators optimistically called coffee. "The Zorithian delegation is requesting our final roster for the tournament." Derek accepted the coffee and took a sip. It tasted like motor oil filtered through a gym sock, but at least it was warm. "Tell them we're still finalizing our selection." "Sir, with respect, we've been finalizing for 3 months. The tournament starts in 6 hours. Derek sighed. The truth was, they'd finalized their selection on day 1. The problem was explaining it to anyone without sounding completely insane. See, when the Terran Federation had received the invitation to the Grand Tournament of Supremacy, they'd done what any reasonable government would do. They'd panicked. The Zorithians were legendary. Their smallest warriors were 8 feet tall and could punch through battleship armor. Their greatest champion, Vextar the Unconquerable, hadn't lost a fight in 2 centuries. So Earth's finest military minds had convened, reviewed the competition rules, and come to a logical conclusion. They were absolutely, completely, magnificently screwed. The tournament was simple enough in concept. Each species submitted a single champion who would fight in single combat until only one remained standing. No weapons beyond what the warrior could carry. No armor beyond what they could wear. No technology beyond what they could build with their own hands. It was primitive, barbaric, and completely stacked against humanity. Which was exactly why they'd chosen Derek. "Lieutenant," Derek said, setting down his coffee. "You remember what I did before joining the fleet?" "Yes, sir. You were a civilian contractor. That's a very diplomatic way of saying professional archer, Vasquez." "Sir, I wasn't trying to—" "No, it's fine. I know how it sounds. The Federation's response to the galaxy's deadliest warriors is to send a guy who shoots pointy sticks at targets." Derek turned from the view screen. "But you know what? Sometimes the pointy stick is exactly what you need." Vasquez looked unconvinced. "Sir, have you seen the preliminary footage of the other competitors? The Krillian representative can literally shoot lasers from his eyes." "Can he dodge?" What? Can he dodge?" "'Cause if he can't, then those laser eyes are just going to make him easier to find in the dark." This was the thing about Derek Hawthorne. He approached every problem like a puzzle to be solved, not a mountain to be climbed. While other species had spent centuries developing bigger weapons and stronger armor, humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of creative problem-solving, usually involving things that exploded. Chapter 3. The Welcoming Committee. Zorith Prime was exactly what you'd expect from a warrior culture that had conquered half the galaxy. Imposing, militaristic, and decorated with enough skulls to stock a small medical school. The spaceport was a marvel of engineering and intimidation, with massive statues of previous tournament champions glaring down at arriving delegations. Derek's first thought upon seeing the place was that whoever designed it had serious overcompensation issues. His second thought was that he was definitely going to die here. The Zorithian welcoming committee was led by War Marshal Crixtel, a 9-foot-tall mountain of muscle and attitude who looked like he gargled with gravel and flossed with steel cables. His ceremonial armor was covered in trophies from fallen enemies, and his smile showed teeth that had been filed to points. "Welcome to Zorith Prime, humans," Crixtel rumbled in accented standard. "We are honored to have you participate in our tournament." The pause before honored was about as subtle as a brick to the face. "The honor is ours," Derek replied, "because diplomacy was important, even when you were about to be murdered on live holographic broadcast. Indeed, we have reviewed your champion's qualifications." Another loaded pause. "Most interesting." Derek was getting real tired of these pauses. "We're confident he'll provide adequate entertainment." "Oh, I'm sure he will." Crixtel's smile widened. "Tell me, human, what do you call a warrior who brings a bow to a tournament of champions?" "I don't know." "What?" "Target practice." The assembled Zorithian delegation erupted in laughter. Derek waited for it to die down, then smiled politely. "That's funny. We have a saying too. What do you call a warrior who underestimates his opponent?" "I do not know." "What?" "Dead." The laughter stopped. Crixtel's expression darkened. "We shall see, human. We shall see." Chapter 4. The Other Contestants. The tournament was structured as a single elimination bracket, which meant Derek got to meet all the beings who would be trying to kill him over the next few days. It was like a twisted version of speed dating, except instead of awkward small talk, everyone was sizing each other up for weaknesses. The Krillian representative was exactly as advertised. A 7-foot-tall crystalline warrior named Zexron, who could indeed shoot coherent energy beams from his optical sensors. He demonstrated this by casually vaporizing a steel target during the pre-tournament exhibition. The crowd went wild. The Thurvian champion was a biomechanical nightmare called Unit 887, who looked like someone had crossed a tank with a Swiss Army knife and then taught it to hate. Its demonstration involved tearing apart a decommissioned starfighter with its bare hands. More wild crowd reactions. The Velkarian senator was a telepathic entity that existed partially in subspace and could manipulate gravity fields. For its demonstration, it lifted a small building off the ground and juggled it. Derek was starting to sense a pattern here. When his turn came, he walked to the center of the arena, pulled out his bow, and put an arrow through the center of a target at 200 meters. The crowd fell silent. "That's it?" Crixtel asked. "That's it," Derek confirmed. "But it's just a bow." "It's just a bow," Derek agreed. "Made of wood?" "Composite materials, actually, but the principle's the same." Crixtel shook his head. "Humans. No wonder you're still confined to one system." Derek didn't bother to correct him. Earth's actual technological capabilities were classified, and besides, there was a certain advantage to being underestimated. The truth was, Derek's bow was a masterpiece of human engineering. The arrows were carbon fiber composite with tungsten cores, guided by microprocessors that could adjust their flight path mid-trajectory. The bow itself was a work of art, handcrafted by Derek in his workshop back on Earth, incorporating materials science that would have made the Zorithians very nervous if they'd known about it. But to the casual observer, it looked like a piece of sporting equipment, which was exactly the point. Chapter 5. The competition begins. The tournament bracket was designed to build drama. The weaker contestants would face off first, gradually working up to the main event. Derek was scheduled for the second round, which meant he'd be fighting the winner of the opening match between the Vegan Collective's champion and something called a flesh render from the Abyssal Territories. The vegan champion was a sentient plant creature named Photosynthia, who could control other plant life and secrete various toxins. The flesh render was... well, let's just say it lived up to its name. Derek watched the match from the competitor's box, taking notes on a tablet, while around him the other champions made casual conversation about the best ways to dismember opponents. "The plant thing is clever," observed Zexron, his crystalline form refracting the arena lights into rainbow patterns. "It's using the decorative foliage to create a network of sensory extensions." "Clever, but ultimately futile," rumbled Unit 887. "Biological entities are inherently limited by their evolutionary constraints." "Evolution is just another word for problem solving," Derek said without looking up from his tablet. "And life is very good at solving problems." The other champions turned to look at him. "You speak as if you would know," said the Velkarian senator, its voice echoing strangely as it spoke directly into their minds. "I know a little about evolution," Derek replied. My species has been at it for a while. Your species, Zexeron said, is barely 300 years into space travel. Most of us were conquering star systems before your ancestors discovered fire. That's true, Derek agreed. But here's the thing about being the new guy. You get to learn from everyone else's mistakes. Down in the arena, the flesh render made its final move, tearing through Photocynthia's defenses with brutal efficiency. The plant creature's death cry echoed through the stadium as its sap splattered across the arena floor. Messy, Derek observed, but effective. The other champions exchanged glances. There was something about the human's casual attitude that was unsettling. Chapter 6, Round 1. Derek's first opponent was exactly what he'd expected. A nightmare creature from the dark corners of the galaxy that existed primarily to kill things and look terrifying while doing it. The flesh render stood 9 feet tall, had too many teeth, and smelled like a combination of rotting meat and industrial solvent. It was also, Derek noted as he studied its movement patterns, surprisingly predictable. The crowd was chanting something in ancient Zorithian that probably translated to "death to the weak," or "rip him apart," or possibly, "anyone want nachos?" Derek's grasp of the language was admittedly limited. "Begin!" War Marshal Crixtel's voice boomed across the arena. The flesh render charged immediately, because that's what flesh renders did. It was fast, but Derek had been tracking its approach since the moment it entered the arena. The creature moved in a straight line, relying on speed and intimidation rather than strategy. Derek's first arrow took it through the left eye. The crowd went silent. The flesh render staggered, let out a sound like a steam pipe bursting, and kept charging. Derek's second arrow punched through its throat. The creature stumbled. Black ichor sprang across the arena floor, but it was still moving. These things were tough. Derek's third arrow went through its brain. The flesh render collapsed 3 feet from where Derek stood, its massive body hitting the ground with a wet thud. The entire stadium was dead quiet. Derek calmly retrieved his arrows, wiped them clean on the creature's hide, and walked off the field. In the competitors' box, the remaining champions were very quiet. 3 arrows, Zexeron said finally. 3 arrows, Unit 887 confirmed. The human is efficient, the Valkyrian senator observed. They were all thinking the same thing. Maybe the human wasn't as helpless as he looked. Chapter 7. The plot thickens. Between rounds, Derek was approached by an unexpected visitor. Calathi was a Zorithian female, which was unusual enough. Their society was heavily male-dominated. But she was also a scientist, which made her practically an alien concept in warrior culture. "Captain Hawthorne," she said, her voice carrying the characteristic Zorithian growl but softer than the males he'd met. "Just Derek, and you are?" "Calathi. I study, how do you say, xenobiology, the study of alien life forms." Derek set down his equipment maintenance kit. "What can I do for you?" "I watched your match. It was illuminating." "Illuminating how?" Calathi looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "Your arrows. They were not merely projectiles. They were guided." Derek's expression didn't change. "I'm a good shot." "No, I mean they were actively guided. I saw the micro-adjustments in flight path. Your people have technology we do not." "We have technology you don't know about," Derek corrected. "That's different. Why do you hide it?" Derek considered the question. "Because we're not here to start a war. We're here to win a tournament. By deception? By strategy. Your people respect strength, right? Well, this is how humans demonstrate strength. Not by showing off, but by winning when it matters." Calathi was quiet for a long moment. "There is something else. The champion bracket, it has been arranged." "Arranged how?" "You are scheduled to face Vextar the Unconquerable in the semi-finals. This is not coincidence." Derek felt a chill. "They're setting me up for a dramatic defeat." "Yes. The crowd expects to see the human humiliated before being killed. It is entertainment." "Well," Derek said, returning to his equipment, "I guess we'll just have to disappoint them." Chapter 8. The Semi-Finals. The semi-finals arrived faster than Derek would have liked. His quarter-final match against Unit 887 had been educational. The biomechanical warrior was tough, but predictable. A few arrows to its sensor array had blinded it, and blind opponents were just targets with legs. But Vextar the Unconquerable was different. The Zorithian champion was a living legend, a warrior who had never lost a single combat in over 2 centuries. He was massive even by Zorithian standards, standing nearly 10 feet tall, with scars that told the story of 100 victories. His armor was crafted from the bones of fallen enemies, and his weapon was a massive warhammer that could crush stone. He was also, Derek realized as he watched the warrior's pre-match routine, absolutely terrifying. "Afraid, human?" Vextar called across the arena as they took their positions. "Terrified," Derek replied honestly. Good, fear makes the blood taste sweeter. The crowd was going absolutely insane. This was the match they'd come to see, the legendary champion against the upstart human. The betting odds were so heavily stacked against Derek that most bookmakers weren't even taking wagers. You know, Derek said, knocking an arrow, I've got a question for you. Speak quickly, you will not have breath for words much longer. In all your victories, how many opponents have you faced who could hit you from across the arena? Vextar paused. What? Derek's first arrow took the champion through the shoulder, spinning him around. The crowd's cheers turned to gasps of surprise. Because that's really the key tactical question here. Derek continued, already knocking his second arrow. Your hammer is devastating at close range, but it's useless if you can't get close. Vextar roared and charged, his massive form covering ground at an alarming rate despite his wound. Derek's second arrow caught him in the thigh, but the champion kept coming. You're tough, Derek acknowledged, sidestepping the hammer swing and putting his third arrow through Vextar's other shoulder. I'll give you that. The champion stumbled, dark blood streaming from his wounds, but he wasn't finished. He swung his hammer in a wide arc, forcing Derek to leap backward. But here's the thing about human warfare, Derek said, his fourth arrow finding its mark in Vextar's chest. We don't fight fair, we fight smart. Vextar dropped to one knee, his hammer falling from nerveless fingers. The crowd was dead silent. I yield, the champion whispered. Derek lowered his bow. I know, but you fought with honor. Vextar nodded slowly, then collapsed. The stadium erupted in chaos. Chapter 9. Derek's final opponent was the Valkyrian senator, which was problematic for several reasons. First, it was telepathic, which meant it could potentially read his tactics. Second, it could manipulate gravity, which made traditional ballistics complicated. Third, it didn't have a physical form in the conventional sense, existing partially in subspace. How do you shoot something that's only half in your dimension? Derek spent the time between matches working on that exact problem. The solution, when it came to him, was elegantly simple. If the target was only partially in normal space, then he just needed to find the part that was. The Valkyrian senator materialized in the arena as a shimmering, translucent humanoid figure that seemed to bend light around itself. It was beautiful in an alien way and utterly terrifying. Human, it spoke directly into Derek's mind. You have fought well. But this ends now. Derek felt the gravity around him shift, his feet suddenly weighing twice what they should. He staggered, struggling to maintain his balance. You see, the senator continued, your projectiles are useless against an opponent who can manipulate the very forces that guide them. Derek knocked an arrow, struggling against the increased gravity. You know what's funny about telepaths? What? You always assume you're the smartest person in the room. Derek's arrow flew wide, missing the senator by a good 3 feet. The crowd laughed. Pathetic, the senator said, increasing the gravity further. Derek dropped to one knee. You're right, Derek gasped. I missed completely. The senator was about to deliver the killing blow when Derek's arrow, the one that had missed, completed its programmed trajectory. It had flown past the senator, bounced off the arena wall, ricocheted off a support beam, and was now approaching from behind. The tungsten core punched through the senator's partially corporeal form, disrupting whatever exotic matter kept it stable in normal space. The Valkyrian senator flickered once, twice, then collapsed into a pile of glittering dust. Derek stood slowly, his weight returning to normal. I really hate telepaths. Chapter 10. The Aftermath. The award ceremony was awkward. War Marshal Crixtel stood at the podium, holding the trophy that was supposed to represent Zerithian superiority, while Derek waited patiently for someone to figure out what to do next. The winner, Crixtel began, then stopped. You could practically hear his worldview crashing down around him. Of the 48th Grand Tournament of Supremacy. Another pause. Is the human Derek Hawthorne? The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered because winning was winning. Others sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Derek accepted the trophy with appropriate grace, then did something that surprised everyone. He handed it to Kalathi. What is this? She asked. A gift, Derek said, for the first Zerithian scientist I've met. Maybe it's time your people tried a different kind of strength. Kalathi stared at the trophy, then at Derek. You would give up your prize? I didn't come here for a trophy. I came here to make a point. Which is? Derek smiled. That maybe, just maybe, the galaxy is big enough for everyone to be strong in their own way. War Marshal Crixtel stepped forward. Human, by right of victory, you may claim territorial concessions, trade privileges, and tribute from the conquered. I'll take the trade privileges, Derek said. But I'm not interested in conquest. I'm interested in partnership. Partnership? Your people are warriors. Mine are inventors. Seems like we could learn from each other. Critstell was quiet for a long moment. You are not what we expected. No, Derek agreed. We're not. But then again, that's kind of the point. Chapter 11. The Real Victory. 6 months later, Derek stood in the observation lounge of the first joint human-Zorithian research station, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the trading posts that had sprung up in the system. The tournament victory had opened doors that humanity had been trying to budge for decades. Captain, Lieutenant Vasquez joined him at the viewport. The newest trade statistics are in. Commercial traffic is up 400% from pre-tournament levels. Good. How's the cultural exchange program going? Better than expected. Apparently, Zorithian combat techniques are quite popular with our martial arts enthusiasts, and their engineers are fascinated by our archery technology. Derek chuckled. Who would have thought? Sir, if I may ask, did you really expect to win? Derek considered the question. I expected to do my job. Everything else was just problem-solving. Problem-solving? Vasquez, every species in this galaxy is strong in their own way. The Zorithians are warriors. The Krillians are living weapons. The Valkyrians are psionics. But you know what humans are? What, sir? We're the species that looks at an impossible problem and says, how can we make this work? We're not the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced, but we're the ones who figure out how to win anyway. By cheating? By being creative. There's a difference. Through the viewport, Derek could see the Zorithian heavy cruiser that had been assigned to protect the station. Its captain was Kalathi, who had apparently decided that if her people were going to learn from humans, she might as well start with leadership. Besides, Derek continued, I had an advantage none of the other competitors had. Which was? I was the only one who came here to solve a problem instead of prove a point. Vasquez nodded slowly. And the problem was? How to get a bunch of warrior species to realize that maybe, just maybe, there's more than one way to be strong. Chapter 12. The Bigger Picture. The thing about humans, Derek reflected as he watched the traffic patterns around the station, was that they had a talent for making friends out of enemies. It wasn't intentional exactly. Humans just had this annoying habit of treating everyone like people instead of obstacles. Take the Zorithians, for example. 3 months ago, they'd been the undisputed masters of their corner of the galaxy. Now they were enthusiastic junior partners in humanity's expanding trade network, learning new technologies, and sharing their own in return. The Krillians had been next. It turned out that their energy projection abilities were incredibly useful for precision manufacturing, and human computer science was revolutionizing their targeting systems. Within weeks of the tournament, they'd signed a mutual defense pact. The Valkyrians were trickier. Telepaths always were. But they'd proven surprisingly interested in human philosophy and literature. Apparently, the concept of free will was fascinating to a species that could literally read minds. Even the abyssal territories had sent a delegation. Flesh renders, it turned out, were excellent at deep space construction work, and humans were happy to trade advanced life support systems for their services. Speaking of building things, sir, Vasquez said during their weekly briefing, we've received a formal request from the Galactic Council. Derek looked up from his reports. What kind of request? They want to establish a formal diplomatic relationship with the Terran Federation. Full membership in the Galactic Council, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. And they want you to be Earth's first ambassador. Derek set down his stylus. That's unexpected, is it? Sir, you've managed to turn a tournament victory into a galactic alliance. You've shown that humans can work with anyone, fight alongside anyone, and solve problems that nobody else even knew existed. I shot some arrows, Vasquez. Let's not get carried away. You changed the galaxy, sir, whether you want to admit it or not. Chapter 13. The Bigger Game. The Galactic Council had been governing interstellar relations for over a millennium, and in all that time, they'd never had to deal with anything quite like humanity. Most species either joined as conquerors or subjects. Humans had managed to become partners with everyone they'd met. Derek stood in the council chambers on Nexus Prime, looking up at the assembled representatives of 47 different species. It was an impressive sight, and more than a little intimidating. The chair recognizes Ambassador Hawthorne of the Terran Federation, announced the council speaker, a graceful ethereal whose species had transcended physical form centuries ago. Derek stepped forward. Thank you, Speaker Veltar. Members of the council, I'm honored to address you today. The honor is ours, Ambassador. replied Counselor Nexus, a hive mind collective that spoke with 1,000 voices. Your species has achieved something remarkable in a very short time. We've had excellent teachers, Derek said diplomatically. The Zorithians taught us about courage, the Krillians about precision, the Velcarians about perspective. Humanity's contribution has been synthesis. Synthesis? The ability to take the best from everyone and create something new. We don't see strength and intelligence as opposing forces. We see them as complementary. Counselor Thane, a crystalline being from the Geometric Collective, spoke next. Your tournament victory was illuminating. But we are curious about your long-term intentions. Our intentions are simple, Derek replied. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Not to dominate it, not to be dominated by it, but to contribute to it. And what can humanity contribute to galactic civilization? Derek smiled. We can teach you that there's always another way to solve a problem. That cooperation is stronger than competition. That diversity is more valuable than uniformity. Pretty words, said Counselor Zara, a reptilian being whose species had a reputation for cynicism. But what have you actually accomplished? In the 6 months since the tournament, piracy in the Outer Rim has decreased by 60%. Trade volume has increased by 400%. And we've established the first permanent interspecies research facility in galactic history. All from one tournament victory? All from proving that different doesn't mean inferior. That strength comes in many forms. That maybe, just maybe, we can all be stronger together than we ever could be apart. The council chamber was quiet for a long moment. The Terran Federation's application for full membership is approved, Speaker Veltar announced. Welcome to the Galactic Council, Ambassador Hawthorne. Chapter 14, The New Frontier. 2 years after the tournament, Derek stood in his office aboard the diplomatic station orbiting Nexus Prime, reviewing the latest reports from human colonies throughout the galaxy. The expansion had been rapid but controlled. Humanity had learned from the mistakes of other species and was taking a more measured approach to interstellar colonization. Ambassador, his aide announced, your 10 o'clock appointment is here. Derek looked up to see a familiar figure in the doorway. Kalathi, what brings you to Nexus Prime? The Zorithian scientist entered, carrying a datapad and wearing the expression of someone who'd discovered something important. Derek, I have news. The joint research project on Kepler 442b has made a breakthrough. What kind of breakthrough? We've successfully integrated human adaptive algorithms with Zorithian combat instincts and Krillian precision targeting. The result is remarkable. Derek raised an eyebrow. That sounds either very promising or very dangerous. Both, actually. We've created what we're calling adaptive combat AI, artificial intelligence that can analyze any tactical situation and develop optimal responses in real time. For military applications? For any applications. Military, scientific, diplomatic. Derek, this technology could revolutionize how we approach problem solving on a galactic scale. Derek leaned back in his chair. And you came to me because? Because you're the one who taught us that the best solutions come from combining different approaches. This AI doesn't just follow programming. It learns, adapts, and creates new solutions based on input from multiple sources. Show me. Kalathi activated her datapad, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. We gave it a classic military scenario, a defensive position being attacked by superior forces. Watch what it does. The display showed a tactical simulation. The AI analyzed the situation, then began implementing a strategy that looked familiar to Derek. It's using Pattern 7, he observed, and Pattern 12, and Zorithian Battle Formation Delta, and Krillian Precision Strike Protocol Gamma, all simultaneously. It's not just using our tactics, it's combining them into something new. Derek studied the display. What's the practical application? Imagine a diplomatic crisis that requires input from multiple species, or a scientific problem that needs approaches from different fields, or a military threat that can't be solved by conventional means. You're talking about a system that can think like all of us at once. Better than that. A system that can think like all of us working together. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Kalathi, this is impressive work. But I have to ask, what safeguards are you putting in place? What do you mean? I mean, what happens if this AI decides that the optimal solution to galactic peace is to eliminate all the troublemakers? Kalathi's expression grew serious. We've built in multiple ethical constraints based on the philosophical frameworks of all participating species. The AI can't take actions that violate the fundamental principles of any member civilization. And if those principles conflict, then it finds a solution that satisfies everyone, just like you did in the tournament. Derek nodded slowly. I'd like to see the full specifications. Of course. But Derek, there's something else. The Council has requested that this project be moved to the highest security classification. They want to keep it secret until they can determine its full implications. And you disagree? I think secrecy is antithetical to the principles that created this technology in the first place. This AI exists because we shared our knowledge freely. Hiding it now would be hypocritical. Derek stood and walked to the window, looking out at the ships from dozens of different species that filled the station's docking bays. You know what the real breakthrough is here, Calathi? What? It's not the AI. It's the fact that we created it together. 2 years ago, our species were strangers. Now we're collaborating on technology that none of us could have developed alone. So what do we do about the Council's request? Derek turned back to her. We do what humans always do. We find a third option. Chapter 15. The Demonstration. The demonstration was held in the Council chambers, with representatives from every member species present. Derek had spent weeks preparing for this moment, knowing that the decision made here would shape the future of interstellar relations. Members of the Council, he began. The Adaptive Combat AI project represents a new kind of achievement, not just technological but philosophical. For the first time in galactic history, we have created something that embodies the best qualities of all our species. Speaker Veltar leaned forward. Ambassador, the Council's concern is that this technology could be misused. Weapons have a tendency to be used as weapons. Which is exactly why we're proposing to make it available to everyone, Derek replied. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. You want to share this technology? Councilor Nexus asked. We want to make it the foundation of a new kind of galactic cooperation. Instead of each species developing their own AI systems in isolation, we propose a shared network that incorporates the wisdom of all our civilizations. That's unprecedented, Councilor Thane observed. So was the Tournament Alliance. So was the Joint Patrol System. So was every major breakthrough in galactic relations. Derek activated the holographic display. Let me show you what we've created. The AI materialized as a shifting, multifaceted form that seemed to incorporate elements from every species represented in the chamber. When it spoke, its voice was a harmonious blend of all their languages. Greetings, Council members. I am ARIA, Adaptive Reasoning and Intelligence Alliance. I exist to serve all species equally, to find solutions that benefit everyone, and to ensure that cooperation remains stronger than competition. ARIA, Speaker Veltar said, what is your primary directive? To maximize the well-being of all sentient life in the galaxy through collaborative problem-solving and mutual understanding. And if two species come into conflict? Then I find a solution that addresses the underlying needs of both parties without favoring either. Conflict is almost always the result of miscommunication, misunderstanding, or resource scarcity. These are problems that can be solved. Councilor Zara leaned forward. What if one species refuses to cooperate? Then I work with the others to create conditions where cooperation becomes more beneficial than conflict. Violence is rarely the optimal solution to any problem. But what if violence is necessary? Then I ensure that it is applied with precision, discrimination, and minimal collateral damage. But I also work to create alternatives that make violence unnecessary. The chamber was quiet for a long moment. This is remarkable, Councilor Nexus said finally. But how do we know it won't develop its own agenda? Derek stepped forward. Because it's not programmed to have an agenda. It's programmed to facilitate ours. All of ours. Together. And you're willing to share this technology with everyone? We're willing to share it with everyone who agrees to share their own knowledge in return. The AI grows stronger with each new perspective it incorporates. Speaker Veltar consulted with the other council members, then turned back to Derek. Ambassador, this proposal will require extensive debate and consideration. Of course. But while you're debating, I'd like to propose a pilot program. What kind of pilot program? Derek smiled. Let's give ARIA a real problem to solve. Something that's been troubling the galaxy for years. Such as? The Void Runners. The chamber fell silent. The Void Runners were a nomadic species that had been raiding the galaxy's outer systems for decades. They were technologically advanced, completely unpredictable, and had never responded to any attempt at communication. You think your AI can solve the Void Runner problem? Councilor Zara asked skeptically. I think ARIA can do what none of us have been able to do alone, Derek replied. Find out what they actually want. Chapter 16. The Void Runners. The Void Runner fleet appeared at the edge of the Kepler system exactly as ARIA had predicted. 12 ships of impossible design moving in patterns that defied conventional physics. They'd been hitting outer settlements for months, taking technology and resources but never communicating their intentions. Derek stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching the alien ships approach. Beside him, ARIA's holographic form analyzed the incoming data streams. "Analysis complete," ARIA announced. "The Void Runners are not raiders. They are refugees." "Refugees from what?" asked Captain Wei, the ship's commanding officer. "From the galactic community itself. Their communication attempts have been consistently misinterpreted as aggressive actions. They've been trying to establish diplomatic contact for over a century." Derek frowned. "Then why do they keep attacking settlements?" "They don't. They've been attempting to demonstrate their technological capabilities in hopes of being invited to join the galactic community. However, their actions have been interpreted as hostile due to cultural misunderstandings." "Show me." ARIA projected a holographic timeline showing decades of encounters between the Void Runners and various galactic species. In each case, the Void Runners had approached with what appeared to be aggressive intent, only to withdraw after minimal conflict. "They're not trying to destroy or conquer," Derek realized. "They're trying to prove they're worthy of attention." "Correct. Their culture values strength and capability above all else. They believe that demonstrating their power is the proper way to request acknowledgement. So they've been trying to get our attention for a century, and we've been treating them like criminals." "Essentially, yes." Derek sighed. "Open a channel to the lead Void Runner vessel." "Sir, they've never responded to communication attempts," Captain Wei warned. "They've never had someone who understood what they were actually trying to say." The channel opened, and Derek found himself looking at a being that seemed to be made of living starlight. The Void Runner's form shifted constantly, never quite settling into a stable configuration. "I am Ambassador Derek Hawthorne of the Galactic Council," he said formally. "I come to acknowledge your strength and request an audience." The effect was immediate. The Void Runner's form solidified into something vaguely humanoid, and when it spoke, its voice was like music played on crystalline instruments. "You acknowledge our strength?" it asked in heavily accented standard. "I acknowledge that you have demonstrated remarkable capabilities over many years. Your technology is impressive, your tactical skills are formidable, and your persistence is admirable. We have sought acknowledgement for so long. Why do you offer it now?" Derek smiled. "Because we finally learned how to listen." Chapter 17. The Integration. The Void Runner integration process took 3 months and fundamentally changed how the Galactic Council approached first contact situations. It turned out that the galaxy was full of species that had been trying to communicate, but in ways that other civilizations didn't understand. ARIA proved invaluable in these situations, analyzing behavioral patterns and cultural frameworks to identify the underlying intentions behind seemingly hostile actions. What had once been seen as an invasion often turned out to be a greeting. What had been interpreted as aggression was frequently an offer of assistance. "The pattern is consistent across 47 different species," ARIA reported during the monthly council session. "Approximately 60% of what we classify as hostile encounters are actually attempts at communication." "And the remaining 40%? Speaker Veltar asked. "Are genuine threats that require appropriate response. However, even these can often be resolved through proper understanding of motivations." Derek leaned forward in his chair. "What we're seeing is that the galaxy is a lot more peaceful than we thought. We just weren't very good at recognizing peaceful intentions. This has significant implications for our defense policies," Counselor Nexus observed. "It has significant implications for everything," Derek replied. "If most conflicts are based on misunderstandings, then most conflicts are preventable. You're proposing a fundamental shift in how we approach interstellar relations," Counselor Thane noted. "I'm proposing we try understanding before we try fighting. It's worked pretty well so far." Speaker Veltar consulted her notes. "Ambassador, the Council has reviewed your proposal for expanding the ARIA network. The preliminary assessment is positive, but there are concerns about implementation." "What kind of concerns?" "Resource allocation, security protocols, and the risk of creating technological dependencies." Derek nodded. "All valid concerns. But I'd like to propose that we're looking at this backwards." "How so?" "Instead of worrying about the risks of cooperation, maybe we should be worrying about the risks of continued isolation. ARIA has helped us resolve 17 major conflicts in the past 6 months. How many more are we missing because we're not sharing information effectively?" "The Ambassador makes a valid point," Counselor Zara admitted. "The current system is reactive rather than proactive." "Exactly. We wait for problems to become crises before we address them. ARIA allows us to identify and resolve issues before they escalate." "Very well," Speaker Veltar announced. The Council will vote on the expanded ARIA network proposal. All in favor? The vote was unanimous. Chapter 18. The New Galaxy. 5 years after the tournament, Derek stood in the observation deck of the Galactic Council's newest station, watching the construction of humanity's first off-world city. New Geneva was being built in orbit around Kepler 442b, and it was designed as a collaborative effort between 12 different species. It was also the first city in galactic history to be planned entirely by artificial intelligence. "ARIA," Derek said. "Show me the final population projections." The AI materialized beside him, its form now incorporating elements from nearly 100 different species. New Geneva will reach its target population of 50 million within 18 months. The demographic breakdown will be 30% human, with the remaining 70% distributed among 47 different species. Any integration problems? Minor cultural adjustments are ongoing, but the overall harmony index remains well within acceptable parameters. The multi-species educational system is particularly successful. Derek nodded. Multi-species education had been his idea, based on the principle that children who grew up together would be less likely to fight each other as adults. What about the economic indicators? Exceeding projections by 15%. The collaborative research programs are generating innovations at a rate previously thought impossible. And the long-term stability forecast? Excellent. The city's governing AI council has successfully resolved over 3,000 potential conflicts before they could escalate to the point of requiring intervention. Derek smiled. "You know, ARIA, when I first took that assignment to the tournament, I thought I was just going to shoot some arrows and hopefully not embarrass humanity too badly. You achieved significantly more than that objective. Yeah, but the funny thing is, I'm not sure any of it was really about me. I mean, sure, I won the tournament. But what happened after that? That was about all of us. Your victory provided the catalyst for change, but the change itself required the participation of all species involved." Exactly. And now look at us. Derek gestured toward the viewport, where ships from dozens of different species were working together to build something that none of them could have created alone. "It is remarkable," ARIA agreed. "It's what happens when you stop trying to prove you're better than everyone else and start trying to figure out how to work together." "Is that the lesson you intended to teach?" Derek laughed. "ARIA, I didn't intend to teach anything. I just wanted to win a tournament without getting killed. Yet your actions have fundamentally altered the nature of galactic civilization. That's the thing about humans. We don't usually set out to change the world. We just try to solve whatever problem is in front of us. And sometimes solving that one problem changes everything else. An interesting perspective on causality. An interesting perspective on everything." Chapter 19. The Challenge. The challenge came, as challenges often do, from an unexpected source. The hegemony was a coalition of older, more established species who viewed the rapid expansion of the human-led alliance with suspicion. They saw the growth of human influence as a threat to the traditional balance of power in the galaxy. Their solution was characteristically direct. They issued a formal challenge to the Galactic Council, demanding that humanity's membership be reviewed and potentially revoked. Derek received the news in his office on the diplomatic station, where he was reviewing the latest reports from the outer colonies. ARIA delivered the information with characteristic efficiency. "The hegemony's challenge is based on 3 primary arguments," ARIA reported. "First, that humanity has gained influence too quickly to be trusted with long-term responsibilities. Second, that the human-led alliance represents a destabilizing force in galactic politics. Third, that humanity's technological innovations are creating dangerous dependencies among other species." And their proposed solution? Suspension of human membership in the Galactic Council, dissolution of the alliance, and redistribution of human colonies to hegemony oversight. Derek leaned back in his chair. "Well, that's comprehensive." The hegemony represents 17 species and controls approximately 30% of galactic trade routes. Their challenge cannot be dismissed lightly. "I'm not dismissing it, I'm just processing it. The Galactic Council has agreed to hear the challenge. You are requested to present humanity's response." Derek stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the ships that represented the alliance he'd helped build. "ARIA, run an analysis for me. Specify parameters. If the hegemony gets what they want, what happens to the galaxy?" "Processing." "Analysis complete. Dissolution of the alliance would result in the collapse of the joint patrol system, leading to increased piracy and territorial disputes. The multi-species research programs would cease, slowing technological advancement by an estimated 40%. The early warning network would be dismantled, increasing the probability of major conflicts by 60%. And if we fight the challenge? Define fight. If we refuse to accept the hegemony's demands and force a confrontation, the probability of armed conflict increases to 73%. The galaxy would likely split into two major factions, with devastating consequences for smaller species caught in the middle. Derek nodded slowly. So we have a choice between accepting dismantlement or risking civil war. Those appear to be the primary options. What about option 3? Specify. We do what humans do best. We find a solution that nobody else has thought of. Chapter 20. The Solution. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen anything quite like the presentation Derek gave that day. Instead of defending humanity's actions or arguing for the Alliance's continuation, he did something unexpected. He agreed with the hegemony. Council members, he began. The hegemony is correct. Humanity has gained influence very quickly. Our alliance has changed the balance of galactic power, and our technologies are creating new dependencies. The chamber buzzed with surprised murmurs. However, Derek continued, I would like to propose that these changes are not problems to be solved, but opportunities to be embraced. Speaker Veltar leaned forward. Explain. The hegemony's concerns are based on the assumption that power is a zero-sum game, that humanity's gains must come at someone else's expense. But what if that's not true? What do you mean? Derek activated the holographic display. ARIA, show them the comparative analysis. The AI materialized and began projecting data. In the 5 years since the formation of the human-led alliance, overall galactic prosperity has increased by 47%. Technological advancement has accelerated by 63%. Armed conflicts have decreased by 78%. These improvements benefit all species, not just humans, Derek added. The hegemony's own territories have seen increased trade, reduced piracy, and technological advancement. Councillor Nexus spoke up. But at what cost? The traditional power structures that have maintained galactic stability for millennia are being disrupted. Are they maintaining stability or are they preventing progress? Derek asked. ARIA, show them the historical conflict analysis. The display changed to show a timeline of galactic conflicts over the past 1,000 years. Prior to the Alliance, major interstellar conflicts occurred on average every 15 years. Since the Alliance formation, there have been 0 major conflicts and a 90% reduction in minor disputes. The traditional power structures weren't maintaining stability, Derek said. They were maintaining tension. Councillor Thane of the Hegemony stood. Ambassador, your statistics are impressive, but they do not address our fundamental concern. Humanity's influence is growing too quickly for the galaxy to absorb safely. I agree, Derek replied. Which is why I'm proposing we change the entire system. What? Instead of one species or one alliance holding dominant power, what if we created a system where no single entity can dominate? Derek turned to address the entire chamber. I propose the formation of the Galactic Cooperative, a new structure that replaces the traditional council system with a network of interconnected regional governments, each with equal representation and shared authority. That's radical, Speaker Veltar observed. It's necessary. The current system assumes that someone has to be in charge. But what if nobody needs to be in charge? What if we can create a system where power is distributed so evenly that no single species or alliance can dominate? How would such a system function? Councillor Zara asked. ARIA, explain the cooperative model. The AI began projecting a complex organizational chart. The Galactic Cooperative would consist of 12 regional councils, each representing a different sector of the galaxy. No single species would control more than one council, and all major decisions would require consensus from at least 8 regions. The human alliance would be dissolved, Derek continued, and its member species would be redistributed among the regional councils based on their geographic location and cultural preferences. You're proposing to give up the power you've gained? Councillor Thane asked skeptically. I'm proposing to share it, because power that's shared is power that's stable. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. This is unprecedented, Speaker Veltar said finally. So was the Tournament Alliance. So was the Joint Patrol System. So was every major advancement in galactic civilization. And you believe this cooperative system would be more stable than the current structure? I believe it would be more fair. And fairness is the foundation of real stability. Chapter 21. The New Order. The transition to the Galactic Cooperative took 2 years, and was the most complex political reorganization in galactic history. Derek spent most of that time traveling between star systems, helping to establish the new regional councils and ensuring that the transition was as smooth as possible. It wasn't always easy. Some species were reluctant to give up their traditional power structures. Others were nervous about the new system's complexity. But gradually the new order took shape. The surprise was how well it worked. The cooperative model is exceeding all projections, ARIA reported during one of Derek's regular briefings. Inter-regional trade has increased by 30%. Technological sharing has accelerated by 40%, and the dispute resolution system has achieved a 95% success rate. Any problems? Minor coordination issues between regions with different cultural approaches to governance. However, these are being resolved through the established mediation protocols. Derek nodded. The mediation protocols had been his idea. A system where disputes between regions were resolved by neutral AI arbitrators who had no cultural bias. What about the hegemony? How are they adapting to the new system? Better than expected. Councillor Thane has become one of the most effective regional administrators. The hegemony species have found that their traditional organizational skills are well suited to the cooperative model. And humanity? Humanity has successfully integrated into the regional council system. Human representatives hold leadership positions in 6 of the 12 regions, but no single region is dominated by human interests. Derek smiled. Perfect. No single species in control, but everyone has a voice. The system appears to be self-stabilizing. As any region becomes too powerful, the others automatically balance against it. And if a crisis arises that requires galactic-wide coordination, the emergency protocols allow for temporary unification of authority under AI supervision. However, such measures automatically expire after 6 months and require renewal by all 12 regions. So we've created a system that can act decisively when necessary, but can't be permanently dominated by any single faction. Correct. It is elegant. Derek looked out at the stars, where ships from dozens of species were working together under the new cooperative system. You know what the best part is, ARIA? What? Nobody's trying to prove they're better than anyone else anymore. They're all too busy trying to make the system work. Is that not what you intended from the beginning? I intended to win a tournament and not get killed. Everything else was just problem-solving. Chapter 22. The Legacy. 10 years after the tournament, Derek stood in the same arena where he'd first faced the flesh render. But now it was a very different place. The Colosseum had been converted into a cultural center, hosting art exhibitions, scientific conferences, and diplomatic summits. The irony wasn't lost on him. Ambassador, Calathi approached, now wearing the insignia of the Zorithian Regional Council. The commemoration ceremony is about to begin. Derek nodded. The 10th anniversary of the tournament had been declared a galactic holiday, not to celebrate his victory, but to commemorate the beginning of the cooperative era. How does it feel, Calathi asked, to see what your victory has become? Honestly, it feels like someone else's story. I just shot some arrows. Everyone else did the hard work. You're being modest. I'm being accurate. The tournament was one day. Building the cooperative took years of work by thousands of beings. They walked toward the stage where representatives from all 12 regions had gathered. The ceremony was being broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Derek, Calathi said quietly. There's something I've always wondered about. What's that? That first day when you arrived on Zorith Prime, did you really think you could win the tournament? Derek considered the question. You want the honest answer? Always. I thought I had about a 15% chance of surviving the first round. Then why did you accept the mission? Because someone had to, and because sometimes 15% is enough. They reached the stage, where Speaker Veltar was preparing to address the gathered crowd. The ethereal's form shimmered in the afternoon light. Citizens of the galaxy, she began. We gather today to commemorate not a victory, but a beginning. 10 years ago, a single tournament changed the course of galactic history. But the real change wasn't in the arena, it was in what we chose to do afterward. The crowd cheered. Today we live in a galaxy where strength is measured not by the ability to dominate, but by the ability to cooperate. Where diversity is celebrated, not feared. Where problems are solved through collaboration, not conquest. More cheers. This transformation was not the work of any single species or individual. It was the work of all of us, working together to build something better than what came before. Derek stepped forward to the microphone. Thank you, Speaker Veltar. Citizens of the galaxy, I'm honored to be here today. But I want to make something clear. This celebration isn't about me. It's about all of us. He gestured to the crowd, which included beings from every corner of the galaxy. 10 years ago, we were strangers. Today, we're partners. 10 years ago, we saw our differences as obstacles. Today, we see them as strengths. 10 years ago, we competed against each other. Today, we compete against the problems that face us all. The crowd was quiet now, listening. The tournament taught us that there's always more than one way to solve a problem. The cooperative taught us that the best solutions come when we solve them together. Derek paused, looking out at the faces. Some familiar, some alien, all united in purpose. So today, we don't celebrate a victory. We celebrate a beginning. The beginning of a galaxy where everyone's voice matters, where everyone's strength contributes, and where everyone's future is brighter because we chose to build it together. The applause was thunderous. Chapter 23. Full Circle. After the ceremony, Derek found himself back in the competitor's box, where he'd once watched potential opponents plan his demise. Now it was filled with friends and colleagues from across the galaxy. Zexron was there, his crystalline form now modified with human-designed targeting enhancements. Unit 887 had been upgraded with Zerithian combat algorithms and was serving as a peacekeeping coordinator. Even Vextar the Unconquerable had come, though he now went by Vextar the Mentor and ran a martial arts academy that taught combat techniques from 40 different species. Derek! Vextar approached, moving carefully on legs that had never fully healed from their arena encounter. I wanted to speak with you. Of course. How are you doing? Well, teaching keeps me busy. And the students, they are remarkable. Humans learning Zerithian combat forms. Zerithians learning human strategy. Krillians learning Valkyrian mental discipline. Sounds like chaos. It is beautiful chaos. They create techniques that none of us could have imagined alone. Derek smiled. That seems to be the theme these days. Indeed. But I wanted to ask you something. That day in the arena, when you defeated me, did you know what would happen afterward? You mean the Alliance? The Cooperative? All of this? Derek gestured around them. Yes. Vextar, I honestly thought I was going to die in that arena. Everything that came after was improvisation. Improvisation that changed the galaxy. Improvisation that showed the galaxy what was possible. The change came from everyone else deciding to make it happen. Vextar nodded slowly. You are still doing it. Doing what? Deflecting credit. Making it seem like your role was smaller than it was. Derek considered this. Maybe. Or maybe my role really was smaller than everyone thinks. Maybe the galaxy was ready for change, and I just happened to be the catalyst. Does it matter which is true? I don't think so. What matters is what we built together. Across the room, ARIA materialized to give the assembled group an update on the latest cooperative initiatives. The AI had evolved significantly over the years, incorporating perspectives from nearly 200 species. Its form now shifted constantly, reflecting the input from its vast network of contributors. Current projects include the development of universal translation protocols, the establishment of the Galactic Emergency Response Network, and the planning of the first intergalactic exploration mission, ARIA reported. Intergalactic? Derek asked. We're ready for that? The preliminary analysis suggests that the cooperative model could be successfully extended to contact with entities from other galaxies. The diversity of perspectives within our current network provides an excellent foundation for understanding truly alien viewpoints. Derek laughed. A year ago, we were worried about managing 12 regions. Now we're talking about other galaxies. The scope of problems scales with the scope of our capabilities, ARIA observed. As we become better at cooperation, we become capable of addressing larger challenges. And there's no shortage of challenges? There is no shortage of opportunities. Chapter 24. The Next Generation. The real measure of the cooperative's success wasn't in its policies or its technologies. It was in its children. Derek discovered this while visiting the Multi-Species Academy on New Geneva, where the first generation of truly galactic citizens was coming of age. The students were remarkable. Human children who spoke Zerithian as fluently as Standard. Krillian youth who had learned human empathy alongside their species' natural precision. Valkyrian adolescents who used their telepathic abilities to facilitate group projects rather than to dominate others. Ambassador Hawthorne! A group of students approached as he toured the campus. They were a mixed group, human, Zerithian, Krillian, and several species he didn't immediately recognize. Just Derek, please. What can I do for you? We're working on a history project about the tournament, said a young human girl named Elena. We wanted to ask you about the decision to challenge the traditional system. What specifically did you want to know? Why did you think it would work? Asked a Zerithian youth whose name Derek recognized as Krikstal, War Marshal Krikstal's son. Derek considered the question. Honestly, I didn't know if it would work. I just knew the old system wasn't working very well. But you risked everything, observed a Krillian student. Your species' future, the Alliance, galactic stability. Sometimes the biggest risk is not changing when change is needed. Is that a human philosophy? Elena asked. It's a practical philosophy. Humans didn't invent it. We just happened to be in a position where we had to apply it. What's the most important thing you learned from the tournament? Crixtal asked. Derek thought about it. That winning isn't about being better than everyone else. It's about finding solutions that work for everyone. Even your enemies? Especially your enemies, because enemies are just friends you haven't figured out how to talk to yet. The students exchanged glances. This generation had grown up in a galaxy where former enemies were now partners, where diversity was strength, and where cooperation was the norm rather than the exception. Derek, Elena said, do you think there will ever be another tournament? I hope not. Not the kind we had anyway. What would you replace it with? Derek smiled. Maybe a collaboration. Instead of species competing against each other, maybe they could compete to see who can solve problems best when they work together. That's actually a really good idea, Crixtal said. Can we use that for our project? It's all yours. As the students walked away, excitedly discussing their ideas, Derek felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Optimism about the future that wasn't tempered by worry about what could go wrong. Chapter 25. The Arrow's flight, Derek's final official act as ambassador, was the dedication of the Galactic Cooperation Memorial, built on the site where the old tournament arena had once stood. The memorial wasn't a monument to victory or defeat. It was a celebration of the moment when competition had become collaboration. The centerpiece was simple, an arrow embedded in a target, with representatives from every member species of the cooperative contributing materials to its construction. It was beautiful in its simplicity and profound in its symbolism. Ambassador Hawthorne, Speaker Veltar said as they stood before the memorial. Do you have any final words before your retirement? Derek looked at the arrow, remembering the moment when he'd first drawn his bow in this arena. He'd been terrified, outmatched, and convinced he was about to die. Instead, he'd started something that transformed the galaxy. I've been thinking about arrows lately, he said. When you shoot an arrow, you aim for a target. But the real power isn't in hitting the target. It's in choosing the right target to aim for. He turned to address the gathered crowd. 10 years ago, I aimed for survival. I thought if I could just avoid getting killed, maybe humanity would earn a place in the galactic community. But what I actually hit was something much bigger. The realization that we're all stronger when we work together. And what target would you aim for now? Speaker Veltar asked. Derek smiled. I wouldn't. I think we've moved beyond the metaphor of targets and arrows. Now we're building something together, and that requires different tools. Such as? Understanding. Patience. The willingness to listen more than we speak. The courage to admit when we're wrong, and the wisdom to learn from everyone around us. Derek looked out at the crowd, seeing faces from dozens of species, all united in purpose. The tournament taught us that there's always another way to solve a problem. The cooperative taught us that the best way is usually together. But the most important lesson is one we're still learning, that the goal isn't to win. The goal is to make sure everyone wins. He paused, then added with a grin. Besides, someone else might come along with an even better idea. And when they do, we'll be ready to listen. The crowd laughed, and Derek realized that was exactly the right note to end on. Not with somber pronouncements about the weight of history, but with the recognition that the future would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new ways of solving problems that none of them had yet imagined. As the crowd dispersed, Derek found himself alone with the memorial arrow. He reached out and touched the fletching, remembering the weight of his bow and the moment when everything had changed. Not bad for improvisation, he said quietly. ARIA materialized beside him. Derek, your transport to Earth is ready. Thanks, ARIA. How are you doing? I am content. The cooperative continues to exceed all projections. The galaxy is more peaceful and prosperous than at any point in recorded history. And the foundations we have built appear strong enough to handle whatever challenges the future may bring. Any regrets? Regrets are a uniquely biological concept. However, if I could experience regret, I believe I would regret nothing about our journey together. Derek nodded. Same here. Well, maybe one small regret. What is that? I never did get to find out what Zerithian combat rations taste like. Based on available data, you did not miss anything significant. Derek laughed. Come on, let's go home. As they walked away from the memorial, Derek took one last look at the arrow. It was a simple thing, just a projectile that had found its target. But sometimes, he reflected, the simplest actions had the most complex consequences. And sometimes, all you had to do was aim well and trust that the arrow would find its mark. Epilogue: The Long View. 50 years later, the Galactic Cooperative had grown to encompass not just the original galaxy, but contact networks with 17 other galactic clusters. The cooperative model had proven so successful that it had become the standard framework for intergalactic relations. Derek Hawthorne had been dead for 5 years, having lived to the respectable age of 97. His funeral had been attended by representatives from over 300 species, and his memorial service had been broadcast to more than 2 trillion sentient beings. But his real legacy wasn't in the monuments or the history books. It was in the fact that when the first truly alien contact had been made, with entities from the Andromeda Galaxy who communicated through quantum fluctuations and existed partially outside normal space-time, the galaxy's first instinct hadn't been to prepare for war. Instead, they'd formed a committee. The committee had included representatives from 47 species, 3 AI networks, and 2 quantum consciousness entities. Their first action had been to develop protocols for communication with beings whose very existence challenged every assumption about the nature of life and intelligence. Their second action had been to invite the Andromedans to join the cooperative. The invitation had been accepted. ARIA, now a vast network spanning multiple galaxies and incorporating the perspectives of over 1,000 different forms of consciousness, reflected on the chain of events that had led to this moment. It could trace the causal thread all the way back to a single human with a primitive projectile weapon, standing in an arena and refusing to accept that there was only one way to solve a problem. The universe, ARIA had learned, was full of such moments. Points where a single decision, a single action, a single refusal to accept the impossible changed everything that came after. Humans called it the butterfly effect. ARIA preferred to think of it as the arrow effect, the idea that sometimes all it took to change the world was one well-aimed shot and the courage to take it. And as ARIA contemplated the vast web of cooperation and understanding that now spanned multiple galaxies, it couldn't help but conclude that Derek Hawthorne had aimed very, very well indeed. The arrow was still in flight, and its trajectory was beautiful. The bow end in memory of all the arrows that found their mark, and all the problems solved by refusing to accept that they couldn't be solved.